When we look up at the night sky, we see darkness scattered with points of light, and it feels natural, almost obvious, as if it could not be any other way. Yet this simple observation hides one of the most powerful lessons about how the universe works and how we should think about it. If the universe were filled uniformly with stars in all directions, and if it had existed forever, then every line of sight should eventually end on the surface of a star. The night sky should blaze with light, as bright as the surface of the sun, but it does not. Instead, it is mostly dark, calm, and quiet. This contradiction is not a mistake of perception, it is a clue. Nature is whispering that our assumptions are wrong, and that the universe is more subtle than our first guesses. Science begins exactly here, not with complicated equations, but with the courage to ask why something so familiar is not what it should be. The darkness of the sky teaches us that the universe has a history, that it is not eternal and unchanging, but dynamic and evolving. Light takes time to travel, and the fact that the sky is dark tells us that the universe has not existed long enough for light from all stars to reach us. It also tells us that stars are not distributed infinitely in space and time, and that energy is not piling up endlessly. These conclusions are not philosophical opinions. They are logical consequences of careful thinking applied to a simple observation. This is the power of science. It shows that deep truths can emerge from ordinary experiences if we are willing to question them honestly. Education at its best does not hand us answers wrapped in authority. It teaches us how to notice contradictions and follow them wherever they lead, even when they challenge comfortable ideas. There is also a motivational lesson hidden in this cosmic darkness. The universe does not reveal its secrets to passive observers. It rewards curiosity, persistence, and the refusal to accept easy explanations. Many people see the dark sky and move on without a second thought, but progress comes from those who pause and say, "That's strange." This habit of mind is more important than memorizing facts. It is the skill of turning confusion into a question and a question into an investigation. When we learn that even the darkness above us carries information about the birth and structure of the universe, we realize that ignorance is not emptiness, it is potential. Every unanswered question is an invitation to think deeper. The lesson extends beyond astronomy. The dark sky reminds us that intuition can be misleading, and that understanding often requires stepping beyond what feels obvious. In life, as in science, the most important truths are not always bright and loud. Sometimes they hide in what seems empty or unremarkable. Learning to pay attention, to doubt assumptions, and to follow reasoning carefully is what transforms confusion into knowledge. The universe is not obligated to make sense to us immediately, but it is remarkably consistent when we approach it with honesty and patience. And in the end, the dark night sky is not a failure of light, but a triumph of understanding. It tells us that the universe had a beginning, that it changes, and that our questions matter. It shows that curiosity can turn darkness into insight, and that education is not about filling minds with answers, but about training them to see the world clearly and ask better questions. When we look up and wonder why it is dark, we are not just studying the universe, we are learning how to think. When we look up at the night sky and see vast darkness sprinkled with stars, it feels so natural that we rarely stop to question it. Yet this simple observation carries one of the most profound lessons about the universe and about the way we should think. If the universe were infinite, static, and filled evenly with stars, then every direction we look should eventually end at the surface of a star, and the sky should glow with overwhelming brightness instead of darkness. The fact that it does not is not a poetic accident or a limitation of our eyes. It is a powerful clue that our assumptions about the universe are incomplete. The darkness tells us that the universe has a finite age, that light has not had infinite time to travel, and that stars are born, live, and die rather than existing forever. This realization does not come from complicated machinery or advanced mathematics, but from taking an everyday observation seriously and following its logic without flinching. That is the real educational power hidden in this question. It shows that understanding begins not with authority or memorization, but with curiosity disciplined by reasoning. The universe is teaching us that appearances can be misleading, and that what seems obvious may hide deep contradictions that demand explanation. The dark sky also reminds us that nature does not bend itself to human intuition. Instead, it challenges us to refine our thinking. Our instincts suggest that more stars should mean more light, yet reality quietly disagrees, forcing us to confront the fact that intuition is a starting point, not a conclusion. This is where genuine learning happens, in the uncomfortable space where expectation collides with evidence. By accepting this discomfort, we train ourselves to think scientifically, to respect facts over feelings, and to let logic guide us even when it leads somewhere unexpected. There is something deeply motivating in realizing that such a grand truth about the origin and structure of the universe can emerge from a simple question asked with honesty. It means that understanding is not reserved for experts alone. It is accessible to anyone willing to observe carefully and think clearly. The darkness of the sky is not empty or meaningless. It is rich with information about time, space, energy, and change. It tells us that the universe is not an eternal, unchanging backdrop, but a dynamic system with a history, a beginning, and an ongoing evolution. This realization reshapes how we see our place in the cosmos, reminding us that we exist within a vast process rather than outside it. More importantly, it teaches a lesson that applies far beyond astronomy. Progress comes from questioning what everyone else takes for granted. Many people look at the dark sky and feel calm or awe, but learning begins when someone pauses and says, "That's strange." That moment of curiosity is the engine of discovery. Education should nurture this instinct, not suppress it with premature answers or shallow explanations. The universe does not reward passive acceptance, it rewards active questioning. When we learn to see darkness not as ignorance but as a signal that there is something to be understood, we develop a mindset that is resilient, creative, and honest. In this way, the dark night sky becomes more than an astronomical observation. It becomes a lesson in how to think, how to learn, and how to face the unknown. It reminds us that even silence and emptiness can speak, that even what is missing can teach us something essential, and that the courage to ask simple questions can illuminate truths as vast as the universe itself. When we confront the simple fact that the night sky is dark despite the universe being filled with stars, we are forced into a deeper way of thinking that goes far beyond astronomy and into the heart of how knowledge itself is built. At first glance, darkness seems like nothing, an absence, something not worth explaining. Yet in science, the absence of an expected effect is often more informative than its presence. If stars were scattered endlessly through space and had existed forever, then light from those stars would have had infinite time to reach us, filling every direction with brightness. The sky would not merely be dotted with stars, it would blaze uniformly, leaving no darkness at all. That this does not happen tells us something fundamental is wrong with those assumptions. The universe must have a limited age, meaning there is a horizon beyond which light has not yet had time to arrive. Stars must be finite in number, finite in lifespan, and unevenly distributed through space and time. Energy must not accumulate endlessly, or else the sky would glow hotter and brighter with every passing moment. These are not guesses or philosophical preferences. They are logical consequences forced upon us by observation. The darkness of the sky becomes evidence, and learning to see it that way is one of the most powerful intellectual skills education can offer. It teaches that understanding is not about being impressed by complexity, but about being honest with reality. Anyone can feel awe looking at the stars, but real insight comes from asking why the sky is mostly empty of light and refusing to accept vague answers. This way of thinking requires discipline because it is uncomfortable to admit that our intuitive picture of the universe might be wrong. Yet that discomfort is precisely where growth occurs. Science advances not by protecting intuition, but by testing it ruthlessly against evidence. The dark sky is a reminder that nature does not arrange itself to match our expectations, and that learning demands humility. It also demonstrates that profound truths are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to notice them. Education, when done properly, does not train people to repeat conclusions, but to recognize when something familiar does not add up, and to follow that inconsistency wherever it leads. In this sense, the darkness above us is not merely a cosmic condition, it is a lesson in intellectual courage, showing that simple questions honestly pursued can overturn entire worldviews and reveal the dynamic, evolving nature of the universe we inhabit. The motivational power of this realization lies in what it teaches us about our role as thinkers and learners in a universe that does not hand out easy answers. The dark sky shows that knowledge is not passive. It is something we actively extract from nature by asking sharp questions and refusing to settle for comforting explanations. Many people assume that science is about accumulating facts, but this example reveals that it is really about learning how to think clearly in the presence of uncertainty. The universe did not explain itself. It presented a puzzle, and only through careful reasoning did humans uncover what that darkness meant. This has enormous implications beyond astronomy. In life, we are constantly surrounded by assumptions that feel natural simply because they are familiar. We accept systems, beliefs, and explanations without examining whether they truly make sense. The habit of mind that notices the dark sky and asks why is the same habit that questions flawed arguments, challenges false certainty, and pushes understanding forward in every field. It teaches patience because answers are not immediate, and resilience because confusion is not a sign to stop, but a signal to continue. The darkness of the universe also carries a humbling message. We are not at the center of everything, and the cosmos is not arranged for our convenience or intuition. Yet this humility is not discouraging, it is empowering. It means that understanding is achieved not through authority or intuition alone, but through effort, reasoning, and evidence, tools available to anyone willing to use them. The fact that such a vast conclusion about the origin and structure of the universe emerges from a quiet, everyday observation is deeply motivating. It tells us that curiosity is powerful, that thinking carefully matters, and that even the most ordinary experiences can unlock extraordinary insights. When education emphasizes this process, it transforms learning from memorization into exploration, from obedience to inquiry. The dark sky becomes a symbol of intellectual opportunity, showing that what we do not immediately understand is not a failure of knowledge, but an invitation to deepen it. By learning to see absence as information and mystery as a starting point rather than an obstacle, we cultivate a mindset capable of growth, discovery, and creativity. In this way, the darkness above us is not merely a feature of the universe. It is a reminder that progress, both scientific and personal, begins with the courage to question what seems obvious and the determination to follow reason wherever it leads, even when the answer forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew. When we seriously confront the question of why the universe is filled with stars, yet the night sky remains mostly dark, we are pushed into a deeper form of thinking that exposes how fragile our assumptions about reality can be. At first, darkness feels trivial, almost unworthy of explanation, because our minds are trained to focus on what is present rather than what is missing. Yet in science, absence can be louder than presence. If the universe were infinite in size, eternal in time, and uniformly populated with stars, then every direction we look should eventually intersect a stellar surface, and the entire sky should glow with relentless brightness. The fact that it does not is not a small inconsistency. It is a profound contradiction that forces us to abandon a comfortable picture of a timeless, unchanging universe. This darkness tells us that time itself matters, that light has a finite speed, and that the universe has not existed forever. It tells us that stars are born and die, that energy is not accumulating endlessly, and that cosmic history is written into what we see and what we do not see. What makes this lesson so powerful is that it does not rely on abstract speculation or authority. It arises from reasoning carefully about an ordinary observation. Anyone who looks up at the sky can ask the question, and anyone willing to follow logic honestly can grasp the conclusion. This reveals a core educational truth. Understanding does not begin with complexity, but with clarity of thought. The universe does not reward vague explanations or poetic metaphors. It demands consistency. When our expectations fail, nature is not wrong. We are. Learning to accept that is a turning point in intellectual maturity. The dark sky becomes a teacher, showing us that intuition is not a reliable guide to truth, but a starting hypothesis to be tested. This realization is uncomfortable because it strips away the illusion that the universe should make sense on human terms. Yet it is also liberating because it replaces passive acceptance with active inquiry. The darkness above us is not empty. It is filled with information about time, distance, and change, waiting for a mind disciplined enough to read it. In that sense, the night sky is not just an astronomical phenomenon, but a lesson in how knowledge is built. Observation first, reasoning second, and humility always. As we push this reasoning further, the darkness of the universe begins to reveal something even more unsettling and motivating. The idea that reality is not static, finished, or neatly packaged, but dynamic and evolving. The dark sky implies a universe with a beginning, a universe that has grown, changed, and continues to change. This realization transforms our relationship with knowledge, because it means that understanding is not about uncovering eternal truths carved into reality, but about constructing models that make sense of evidence within limits. The sky is dark not because stars are rare, but because the universe itself has a history. Light from distant stars and galaxies has not had infinite time to reach us, and some light will never reach us at all. This introduces the idea that there are horizons to knowledge, not because of human weakness, but because of the structure of reality itself. This is a deeply educational lesson. There are questions that cannot be answered simply by trying harder or thinking longer, because the universe imposes constraints. Yet recognizing these limits is not a defeat, it is progress. It teaches us to ask better questions, to frame problems in ways that can be tested, and to accept uncertainty without surrendering rigor. The dark sky reminds us that knowledge grows not by pretending to know everything, but by clearly identifying what can and cannot be known. This mindset is essential not only in science, but in any serious pursuit of understanding. It encourages patience because answers may take generations, and honesty because pretending certainty where none exists undermines learning. The motivation here comes from realizing that the universe is intelligible, even if it is not fully explainable. We may not grasp every detail, but we can uncover consistent patterns, test predictions, and refine our understanding. The darkness is not chaos. It is structured, meaningful, and informative. Learning to see it that way trains the mind to value evidence over comfort and clarity over confidence. Education often fails when it presents knowledge as complete and polished, leaving no room for doubt or curiosity. The dark sky teaches the opposite lesson, that doubt is productive, that confusion is a sign of engagement, and that the most important discoveries often begin with a simple question that refuses to go away. The deepest motivational lesson of all lies in what this cosmic darkness says about our role as thinkers within the universe. The stars do not explain themselves, and the universe does not announce its rules. It simply behaves, and it is up to us to notice, question, and reason. The fact that such a vast conclusion about the origin and structure of the universe can be drawn from a quiet, everyday observation is profoundly empowering. It means that understanding is not reserved for a special class of minds, but is accessible to anyone willing to think carefully and honestly. The habit of asking why the sky is dark is the same habit that drives progress in every field. It is the refusal to accept appearances as explanations. This habit is not about skepticism for its own sake, but about respect for reality. It is about believing that the world makes sense in a deep way, even when that sense is not immediately visible. The darkness above us also teaches humility, reminding us that we are small parts of a vast process, not its center or final goal. Yet this humility does not diminish human significance, it enhances it. To be able to understand even a fraction of the universe's story is remarkable, and it comes not from dominance or certainty, but from curiosity and discipline. The motivational force here is subtle but powerful. Confusion is not an enemy of learning, but it's fuel. The dark sky invites us to think harder, not to look away. It challenges us to develop the patience to sit with unanswered questions and the courage to follow logic wherever it leads, even when it dismantles cherished beliefs. In life, as in science, growth begins when we notice that something does not add up and choose to investigate rather than ignore it. The universe, through its darkness, is offering a silent challenge, not to accept what seems obvious, but to look deeper, think clearer, and trust that understanding is built step by step through honest questioning. When we accept that challenge, the night sky stops being merely dark and becomes a profound reminder that the greatest insights often begin with the simplest observations and the bravery to ask, why? It tells us that curiosity is powerful, that thinking carefully matters, and that even the most ordinary experiences can unlock extraordinary insights. When education emphasizes this process, it transforms learning from memorization into exploration, from obedience to inquiry. The dark sky becomes a symbol of intellectual opportunity, showing that what we do not immediately understand is not a failure of knowledge, but an invitation to deepen it. By learning to see absence as information and mystery as a starting point rather than an obstacle, we cultivate a mindset capable of growth, discovery, and creativity. In this way, the darkness above us is not merely a feature of the universe. It is a reminder that progress, both scientific and personal, begins with the courage to question what seems obvious and the determination to follow reason wherever it leads, even when the answer forces us to rethink everything we thought we knew. When we look up at the night sky and notice how much of it is dark, we are encountering one of the most quietly powerful lessons the universe has to offer, because this darkness is not a trivial background, but a direct challenge to our assumptions about reality. At first, it feels obvious that the sky should look the way it does, but when we stop and think carefully, the situation becomes deeply puzzling. If stars fill the universe in all directions, then every line of sight should eventually meet a star, and the sky should glow intensely rather than remain mostly black. The fact that it does not immediately tells us that something fundamental about our mental picture of the universe is wrong. This is where real education begins, not with answers, but with the recognition that something does not add up. The darkness forces us to confront ideas about time, space, and energy that go far beyond what our senses suggest. It tells us that light does not arrive instantaneously, that the universe has a finite age, and that stars are not eternal objects shining forever. These conclusions do not come from authority or tradition. They are demanded by logic applied to observation. The dark sky becomes a kind of natural experiment, always running above our heads, waiting for someone curious enough to notice its implications. This teaches an essential lesson. Understanding is not about complexity or sophistication, but about clarity and honesty. The universe does not care about what feels reasonable to us. It behaves according to its own rules, and it is our responsibility to discover them. Learning to accept that our intuition can be wrong is uncomfortable, but it is also the doorway to genuine insight. The darkness above us is not empty ignorance. It is information encoded in absence, and learning to read it is one of the most important intellectual skills we can develop. As we follow this line of reasoning further, the darkness of the sky reveals something even more unsettling and profound, that the universe is not timeless or static, but dynamic, evolving, and unfinished. The night sky is dark because the universe has a history, and that history limits what we can see. Light takes time to travel, and the universe has not existed forever, which means there are regions whose light has not yet reached us, and regions from which it never will. This realization reshapes our understanding of knowledge itself. It tells us that there are built-in limits to what can be observed, not because of human weakness, but because of the structure of reality. This is a crucial educational lesson, because it teaches us to distinguish between questions that are meaningful and answerable and those that are not, at least not in the way we might hope. The universe does not promise us complete transparency, but it does offer consistency. By recognizing limits honestly, we gain stronger understanding, not weaker. The dark sky teaches us that knowledge is provisional, always shaped by evidence and constrained by context. This is not a reason for despair, it is a reason for precision. It encourages us to build models that work within known boundaries and to revise them when new evidence appears. In this way, the darkness above us becomes a lesson in intellectual humility and rigor. It shows that pretending to know more than we do is the fastest way to stop learning, while admitting uncertainty is often the first step toward deeper insight. Education fails when it presents knowledge as complete and finished, leaving no room for doubt or curiosity. The universe, through its darkness, teaches the opposite lesson, that doubt is not a weakness, but a tool, and that understanding grows through careful questioning rather than confident assertion. There is also a deeply motivational dimension to this realization, because it shows that extraordinary understanding can emerge from ordinary observation. You do not need exotic instruments or advanced mathematics to begin asking why the sky is dark. You only need the willingness to think seriously about what you see. This is empowering because it means that insight is not reserved for specialists alone. The habit of mind that notices a contradiction between expectation and reality is the same habit that drives progress in every field, from science to philosophy to everyday problem solving. The dark sky becomes a symbol of intellectual opportunity, reminding us that what we take for granted often holds the deepest lessons. Many people look at the night sky and feel awe, but learning begins when awe turns into curiosity, and curiosity turns into disciplined thought. This process requires patience because answers are rarely immediate, and courage because following logic honestly can force us to abandon comfortable beliefs. Yet it is precisely this process that builds intellectual strength. The universe is not designed to reassure us. It is designed to be consistent. When we align our thinking with that consistency, even uncomfortable truths become sources of clarity rather than confusion. The darkness teaches us to respect evidence over intuition and reasoning over assumption. It shows us that progress is not about collecting facts, but about refining the questions we ask. This is a powerful motivational lesson because it reframes confusion as a sign of engagement rather than failure. When something does not make sense, it is not an obstacle to learning. It is an invitation to think more deeply. Ultimately, the dark night sky offers a lesson not just about the universe, but about how to live as a thinking being within it. It reminds us that reality does not owe us simple explanations, and that understanding is earned through effort, honesty, and persistence. The universe does not announce its rules. It reveals them quietly through patterns, limits, and contradictions that only become visible when we pay close attention. The darkness above us is one such revelation, pointing to a universe with a beginning, a history, and an ongoing evolution. Accepting this changes how we see ourselves, not as central or privileged observers, but as participants in a vast process that can nevertheless be partially understood. This is both humbling and inspiring. It tells us that while our perspective is limited, our capacity to reason is powerful. The greatest danger is not ignorance, but the refusal to question what seems obvious. The dark sky challenges us to resist that danger, to cultivate curiosity, and to trust that careful thinking can illuminate even the deepest mysteries.